Sweet. There we go. Recording started. Okay, so thank you everyone. Welcome councillors, welcome those online. Welcome staff. Apologies for displacing the ELT meeting. And appreciate it's been a full day for all of you as well. I'm really interested to hear the update and the reflections on what staff and others have heard on the simplifying local government, and as we start our journey into that, just to to councillors, I guess, to be mindful that whilst we might be thinking about our own roles in all of this, that'll be the same for our staff as well. So just before and other organisation staff. So I think how we approach the discussion and future decision making needs to be really sensitive to that, because at the end of the day we're sort of all about outcomes, and be interested to see where we go with the discussion. So I'll just hand it straight over to you guys. Thank you.
Cool. I'll just do a quick intro and then I'll hand to Campbell to walk through what we want to cover today. So really all we're going to do today is just talk through at a high level what the pathway that's available to us, what it is. We've sent around the documents which you will have read, so we won't kind of labour that. There's just some key points that Campbell will go through, and then really we've just got a couple of prompters for you to then have a discussion about the different pathways we could take from here and what your appetite is for those different pathways, to then mostly for John to take into the discussion that will be happening at the mayoral forum for Otago next week, and to inform like the next tranche of work that you might want us to do to support either that or a different process. So I'll just hand over to Campbell and start with just a quick overview of the Head Start pathway itself, and then we've just got a couple of just for you, and you can chat away.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. Won't spend too long, but I thought we'd just give you an overview just to frame the discussion. But once again, the purposes for you guys to discuss potential pathways. So just briefly about the pathway. So it is voluntary. It's a voluntary pathway to streamline councils wanting to make a proposal for a unitary status, essentially. The outline of the proposal is due on the 9th of August. It's mainly in a response to the simplifying local government consultation that happened a while ago that we talked about. So the draft document talks about many of the issues that were raised. A lot of councils raised similar issues, and that was all addressed in the document. But essentially, there are a handful of councils that are ready to go for unitary status. This is made for them. There are some conditions for submissions. So the second page of your handout does kind of handle some of those examples, but essentially, any two or more territorial authorities can put forward an outline proposal. This is a very, I don't want to say rough, but it is an outline proposal, and it's intended to be such. And so there's nothing really else except for the criteria is all there as well in terms of the deliverability, supports new planning systems, simplifies local government, economies of scale, and maintains local voice. What they'll be judging, I guess other context which you probably already know, but does frame the discussion, is that the proposal will be reviewed by Cabinet this side of the national election, but any legislation will be passed on the other side of the election.
If I can just jump in as well, when I was in Wellington past couple of days, I've been having some conversations with the DIA, people that have been involved in this as well. I think it's really important to note that there is a bit of a division between the line that the politicians have taken, which are very much like, go ahead, start, or it'll be forced on you, versus the actual process that they're working up, and some of these policy documents is much more, it's much less hardline than that, because the reality is only 4 or 5 are likely to get, no matter how many proposals they get as part of Head Start, probably only 4 or 5 will get progressed. So they can't beat the rest of us up for having tried to get involved and not being able to. I think we might see that it's less brutal as it's been pitched. That's not reflected in the policy documentation at all.
I think it's probably just worth highlighting a couple of things in terms of the proposals. So they really only want one proposal from a region, but the proposal can be for more than one unitary authority. but they're saying they'll only consider more than one unitary authority in a region where there is sufficient complexity to say that that's required, essentially. You can include in your proposals going across existing regional boundaries, so you can, there are different combinations that could be put forward. But one of the key things to keep in mind when we then start talking about the potential pathways is that not some of the territorial authorities in a region can put forward a proposal that affects the others and it can be accepted by government. So if you have two or more territorial authorities who represent either more than 50% of the population or are a majority of the number of councils, they can put forward a proposal that not only affects them, but affects the other territorial authorities in the region, and it can be accepted. So that's just important to consider when we look at the different pathways and what we might want to do next.
Things can be done.
One council on its own can't put in a proposal, or even a grouping of councils that are a minority can't put in a proposal on its own, and regional councils can't put in a proposal. So regional councils' functions are affected. So all proposals have to show how regional council functions will come into the unitary authority or authorities, but regional councils themselves can't. They're not a party to the proposal.
So, not without getting into the proposals, that means QLDC and CODC aren't a majority of the region, and therefore could put in their own proposals.
If we're more than 50% of the population of the region, we
We're
could.
not.
But-
That's what I'm saying.
So no, we couldn't.
No.
But we could, in partnership with
Yeah.
the rest of the region, decide that
Yeah,
inland and coastal
Yes.
is the best option,
Yeah.
and that would be the proposal.
So
You can't just-
Dunedin and somebody else could put in a proposal that affected us because they make up more than 50%. Yeah. Yeah, so the proposal is,
Get together to drag us into it.
oh, wow,
So
that will be one of the pathways available to you.
Right.
One of the things that was discussed a lot in Wellington was the emphasis on simplification.
Yeah.
If it's not obviously simple, it won't fly. And the other aspect was the relationship to the proposed planning shifts as well. So it needs to be something that speaks well into the.
Which is interesting, because Bishop's already made very clear that he didn't like the sub-regional spatial plan, which means that it doesn't fit with the legislation, the planning legislation. So it might be a little that.
But we're not sure if it was that he didn't like it as a concept or whether he knew something was changing along
Yes.
these lines and
Yes.
just wanted to put it in a regional deal.
I think he also, I think the view was expressed through those discussions that having two sub-regional plans is possible under the planning bill legislation anyway. So we didn't need to have another mechanism to do that.
That's not how it read, the feedback from the minister, but yeah.
So on the process, there's this backstop, whatever that looks like, and to see if anyone knows what that looks like. If we put some random thing in, under the head start, knowing that it's not going to go forward because it's probably not simple enough. How do we know how that will be treated? Will be that you need to get it across the line so you can be backstopped even though you put something in?
So I think the way that it'll work is the backstop process will be available to everybody who didn't have a Head Start proposal accepted. And that process is mandatory. But what we don't know is whether that process will just look like what we were going to have before. So for the regions who haven't had a proposal accepted, we'll have a combined territories board. They'll have 2 years to do a regional reorganisation plan, same kind of process, or if that process will change and it'll be more directive. I suspect it'll be more directive in the unitary authority space because this is much more directive that you will do unitary authorities and you will not have any that are single council. So this is very clear that it's about amalgamation.
But even if it's more directive, it's hard to imagine the backstop wouldn't involve any discussion or engagement or.
No, and there'll be, the majority will be in the backstop situation.
Yeah.
So, and the officers have not got a process designed up around that at the moment.
No.
So that could change quite significantly depending on the tone of the government that's elected in November as well. So, you know, there's a bit of crystal ball going on when it comes to the backstop process at the moment.
Putting in the complexity though, or the complexity of the regional deal discussion, for instance, is that not grounds to say that the Head Start pathway is not actually the right thing? Because we're engaged in this other process with government, any changes, we should be working collaboratively with you through that process, and therefore the Southland, Invercargill, Tasman, Nelson ones are going to override us anyway. They're going to be the easy ones because they all want to do it. They know how they're going to do it.
Well, that might be a reason
So-
why we don't want to do,
Yeah.
you don't want us to do Head Start.
It might be that we don't do Head Start on that basis, that we rely on the regional deal to be the informer of the future direction.
So I think the question might be though, is we've done all the stuff in a regional deal, surely you want to be a sub-region together. Why haven't you applied for Head Start? Could be the question. But you are equally right though, Quentin, I think, with regards to, as far as I was hearing, no one's actually sitting there waiting for an application from Otago because there are 4 or 5 areas that are obviously badly in need of this. You know, they are much more focused on Wellington, Western Bay of Plenty, Hamilton and the Waikato. Like there's some obvious areas that are first off the blocks on this.
And some really small councils that want to get
Very
involved, and there's some Canterbury issues. Yeah, there's one
some
obvious
obvious
area. Yeah.
But we as Otago, equally, reputationally, do we want to show Willem? I think that's probably part of the conversation that you need to have.
Which probably leads us nicely to, Campbell can talk us through what the different pathways might look like. And then
Yeah.
you can debate which of these has various merits or otherwise.
Sure. So the way that this is displayed, this is just for sake of conversation. It's obviously not set in stone, but essentially there is a backstop and a Head Start pathway, pros and cons to both of those. That's the most immediate decision, I guess, but I guess it's still up for debate. But the pros and cons of these are laid out. Essentially, it's about taking the Head Start pathway that could be seen as simple and fast by the central government, but there's cons that it could potentially be a bit too fast. There's opportunity cost of council resource and time. Obviously, there's the planning system to integrate as well, which was mentioned in the proposal. If we were to go down the Head Start pathway, then there's a second set of decisions, essentially, whether there's a region-wide collaborative proposal or a proposal with QLDC and a partner, but I guess that depends on what Otago region as a whole decides.
The majority, yeah, we're still
Yeah.
reliant on the Otago wide.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would depend on the appetite from the Otago region.
So even option 2 would require us to go to the Otago wide through maybe the Mayoral Forum or something and say, this is what we'd like to do. Will you mesh that into your proposal for the region?
Well, I guess if we went through the Otago wide option, what we would be committing to, and John might have more information on this to talk to, or might after the next Mayoral Forum, is that essentially we would be committing to being part of a joint collaborative process with all of the Otago councils, where we're all working together to come up with different options that then get considered by all of the councils in the Mayoral Forum, as opposed to us. Well, I guess you could take the view that you have a view and you take it to the Mayoral Forum and say, this is what we want. Can you incorporate it in your proposal? But what we're kind of suggesting here is that being part of a collaborative process, at the beginning at least, where there is joint work that informs a range, that identifies a range of options that could happen across the Otago region, and that work, I think the proposed approach is that work might then go back to individual councils and everyone individually considers it, but they're starting from the same base of options and evidence.
So one of the things that I would just add to that is that the Mayoral Forum previously, once the simplification for local government work was announced, had a plan of work in place to start to work through in preparation for the CTVs and what we thought was coming. So they have actually started to have these conversations and exercise that sort of collaborative muscle. And on the 22nd of May, their next meeting is here, which was always going to be focused on local government reform. And in the light of this announcement, it provides particularly good opportunities to have that conversation.
So just, and I'm not for a minute suggesting that this will be the outcome, but just trying to understand the rules. So let's say Dunedin and ourselves put forward a proposal from two councils that there were two unitary urban councils and everyone else joined up. We'd be able to do that because we were two councils with more than with the majority of the population working in partnership with a proposal. Is that, or am I misreading?
I think that the proposal has to be amalgamation. But what your scenario is there is that the three others are amalgamated, but these two aren't. So possibly that would technically meet the requirements. We'd have to, I think it probably would. Yeah.
So you mean, John, that the Dunedin and us said, this is how we think it should be recut, coastal unitary, inland unitary.
No, he was saying something different, which was
Dunedin City unitary,
Right.
Queenstown Lakes unitary, and everyone else is amalgamated.
Or,
And Otago.
yeah, or a Queenstown Lakes, half of Central Otago, Maniatoto and Tevia go with Dunedin,
Yeah.
Waitaki takes its other half to Canterbury. So,
Yeah, it
because
doesn't
we've
mean how
got,
you cut it up, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying,
Yeah.
so you,
Yeah.
you're saying of two councils over, I see DCC and us came with a proposal for us to each remain and the others,
No.
three, is it three or four?
Three.
Three.
in theory, us and Dunedin together could put forward a proposal with any combination.
Yeah.
Because that affects everybody,
Yeah.
because together we are more than 50%.
Yeah. Muscle them out, but the interesting, I don't think Central Otago are that keen, to be fair, because I mean, notwithstanding, they might not have a choice, but they, you know, as I said, the numbers don't really play out in their favour. They lose a massive amount of representation, whichever way you look at it. Just because, anyway, but the Tamer's original suggestion was that we try to maintain the integrity of our areas, but enter a joint services agreement. That was her sort of an initial reaction, but I mean, that's clearly moved on, but Tracy didn't seem to think there'd be support around the table for something like that.
I mean, the message I've heard from Central Otago is they'd be happy to merge with the other Clutha, but there's absolutely zero appetite.
Zero.
Zero appetite. Well,
Really?
zero appetite currently to associate with the Queenstown part of the district.
Other than Tamer.
yeah,
I mean, she understands the logic, but
Yeah.
as the last conversation I had was that it should be the minority of one around the council.
What they're going for at the moment, though, is best case scenario for them.
Mm.
But what may get presented to them is
And
less.
I think it's, you know, when we're apart from looking at geographical base, population, catchments, understanding what unitary authority or what the functions are that we'll be doing, then we don't understand each other's asset sheets, we don't understand each other's debts, we don't understand what the work programme priorities are, what the communities are looking at. So it's very difficult to try and see where the fit is, what the friction would be. You know, it might be that our debt headroom suddenly enables more sparsely populated populations to actually to raise money to do the infrastructure that they need to do. So I don't know, it's a different way, but I think it's how do we find out what we don't know in order to eyeball each other? And I think that's part of it.
That's the value of the Otago-wide process, because what happens in that process is that you collect information and do analysis of all of the councils together, which is kind of what we did when we were looking at all of the different options for the water entities. For those of you who were on the last council, when we were looking at the potential joint options, you recall the analysis that was done by Morrison Lowe that supported what it would look like if these joined, what it would look like if we had all of these councils, what if it was only us and Central Otago's water functions. So I would expect this piece of work might have something similar that is surfacing all of that information and other things, more subjective things, place-based importance in different places. And so that you've got that information in front of you as a group of councils across Otago, to then be able to say, okay, well, what does this say about the different options and which ones might have best outcomes for Otago, which might have best outcomes for Queenstown, which might have best outcomes for Central Otago.
But I don't think we should kid ourselves either. So the piece of work there around, systems alignment and financial relationships, et cetera, that a lot of that will come in the detailed design piece.
Yes.
We're not going to have time to do it in 90 days. And also we shouldn't kid ourselves that there are going to be some great easy wins there. I don't think government thinks that any of this is going to be a nice seamless integration. Oh, great, these systems work well together. This financial relationship works well together. That's really unlikely. I think we should assume that it's going to be a difficult wedge together to start with, but that they're looking at this for the longer term. Like, this is about, there's no quick and easy way through it, I think, from an organisational perspective.
John,
There'll be a bit of Frankenstein's monster about it.
Can I ask a question then on the right to require? So could the Invercargill councils, based on their size, if they do a deal, could they require, as part of that deal, require us to join based on numbers?
We're not in their region.
Yeah, and
But it's region defined.
well, it is partly because the current, because that has to align with the current planning legislation being developed, which is based on the existing regions.
We're ring fenced in the region, but the appeal of the numbers actually have appeal, because if you amalgamate the 3 small rural councils, there's 61,000, the larger than us at 53,000, and that leaves Dunedin at 131,000. And with our growth rate, we will be the second largest council in 16 years.
Yeah.
No less.
I think the interesting thing as well is as Stephen alluded to, like, actually this doesn't have to be, oh no, it's John, sorry. It doesn't actually have to be cut along existing district boundaries. So that's a thing.
Yeah, sure. It could be parts.
And equally, yes, they're encouraging us to stay within region, but there actually isn't anything to say that we could step slightly outside of. So if you're thinking communities of interest and economic flows, there could be arguments for us to expand somewhat.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking.
Because I couldn't, in the government paperwork that came out, they were using the word region with a small r and not really defining it as being regions as per X, Y, and Z.
I think we could assume it's the current regional boundaries, but what could happen is Dunedin and us could decide we wanted to join up with Invercargill and everybody else, and it would affect them.
The classic is
But they couldn't do it once, I don't think.
because the Waitaki across to regional councils and I mean, in terms of simplification, it clearly has to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, it just has to.
And keeping in mind our soft boundary on our spatial plan actually currently includes Cromwell and Tiano and Milford Sound.
On the region, on the spatial.
Spatial plan.
We've got a question online. Nikki, yeah, Nikki.
Oh, hey everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to, it feels very much like the Three Waters when it first started. We're all kind of jumping in thinking that we have to do this thing. And of course, something's going to happen, but it is going to take time. And I just don't think we need to leap. One of the things that's concerning me is we don't understand RM reform. And we're proceeding as though, and I know the government said the ORC doesn't have a role to play in this. They might not get to put in a proposal, obviously, or be a voting party, but I think we absolutely need to understand their role and how they see it might work, or what the problems might be with different kind of permutations. So, this is about water and there's nothing more important. So I think it's really important that we don't lose the ORC's knowledge in this conversation, and that we don't rush it. That's all.
I think that's another kind of point in the box of participating in an Otago-wide process to start with, because that will be part of that process, understanding what the regional functions are and how they could be negatively impacted by splitting them versus, which ones, if you split them, would have minimal impact. I think it's also important to remember that at a minimum, the backstop pathway is likely to reflect the current process that was proposed, which requires you to do it together as a region. So the process that was proposed for simplification was that the mayors formed the Combined Territories Board and had a period to come up with a regional reorganisation plan that then was agreed and then had to be implemented, which could have been multiple unitaries, some people staying the same, whatever, but it was still a regional process that the region had to agree to. So in that respect, we can wait for that process But that will still be a regional process. So there isn't a pathway here, an obvious pathway here that's available to us, which is we do our own thinking and put up our own proposal under both of these.
Is there anything we can learn because of the questions about representation and that, unitaries of, this conversation's been had and people have walked this path before, right? We've had sort of unitaries formed. So is there anything that we can take out of the learning of what's happened, in the areas where there are unitary councils now, to see, what was there before, what's there now, certainly in terms of representation, how some of these issues were addressed. I mean, there would have been long and heated debates, I imagine, around a lot of this stuff.
I mean, I think-
So that might be, even a retrospective. I don't know.
Well, I think
Can we ask some of those?
There
councillors?
absolutely, there'll be some great lessons learned around this, but what I would say is we're not being given the option of to be a unitary or not to be a unitary. The direction here is being a unitary. So there will be lessons to be learned from the transition piece, but in terms of.
But it might help us about how we think about the region and maybe if there are boundaries with more than one. I don't know.
Yeah, we
So
can see what we can find.
Alex Palmley, who is the CEO of Waitaki, has actually been through this process in the UK. So
It's like, yeah, but
Fine.
but I would imagine that Nelson Tasman and Co would probably give some good
yes,
reflections on.
so I think there are some New Zealand examples that should be providing that we should be able to get access to. But Alex also probably has some lessons from the process he went through in the UK.
Experience.
But, yeah, sure, but now, Nelson, Tasman and Marlborough are versions that are off the table because they are unitaries only, because because I was around at that time. So, back then, when they started out after 1989, they were 3 separate local authorities within one regional council. That only lasted 18 months before it was disestablished, and Graham Martin came down here and became the CE, the Otago Regional Council. So they became standalone unitaries, like the Chatham Islands are, which is utterly unsustainable. The only real comparable one is Gisborne Tairāwhiti, which is made up of 7 previous local authorities that now have one office in Gisborne, and that's about it. And the only entity that has presence through it, because I work there often, is the 2 iwi. So we don't have that issue here. So if we were going to look at them, I think probably Gisborne, Tairāwhiti, and maybe Auckland, the way it's gone, which is 10 local authorities. But in this, I've heard with Northland having to look at this, some, and particularly in Whangarei, are saying, well, they would like to take, is it Rodney at the very north of Auckland? They'd like to include that. Now, Auckland can't get involved in the conversation, but they could put a proposal that would take Rodney into their northern one, which is interesting.
LGNZ might have some good information for us on this, actually, because this.
Who's that?
LGNZ.
Yes, sure.
Might be the only people wanting to understand the unitary journey.
We'll follow that up with LGNZ to see if they've got, because I'm pretty sure actually there was quite a bit of work done by the Future for Local Government panel in informing their recommendations around this stuff. But I think we found some of it, but some of it has probably been lost in the.
Once again, the 3 waters stuff gave a pretty clear direction of, I mean, originally it was 4 and then it was it 13 or 14 or something, wasn't it? So going from, or 11 or something. I don't know.
It was 8 in the end.
I know in the end, but
On the
some
way.
stage there was
That's right.
a version
Yep.
along the way where that signalled that that's where they were probably heading.
Yep.
But anyway, let's see.
Yeah, question. Yeah, Nikki?
Thanks. Has there been any information about, let's say we went Head Start and let's say National gets in, bit of a few assumptions here, and the legislation gets pushed through quickly. How does this affect the next LTP if we move faster or slower?
It's a really good question, Nikki, and actually on the briefing that I was on, it was the main question from most authorities, because whether you're in the Head Start or not, it actually really calls into question the scope and scale of your LTPs. So I think there's a few questions to be answered really in the next couple of weeks as to what that looks like.
Yeah, I think we need to understand all of that stuff, and I think we need to take a look at all of this through a risk lens, if Gareth's in the room, and understand it from that perspective as well.
I think we possibly won't have it wouldn't surprise me if we don't have a definitive answer on the LTP situation in time.
It'll be
For the
similar
process.
to 3 years ago, we would just carry on until we know different.
Yeah.
And then we have to scramble and change everything in the last minute.
3 versions.
Yeah.
So on the briefing that I
I've recovered from that.
sat in on, the minister's political advisor was there, which I found extraordinary, but he was there. And he, in answer to that question, said, just do it. Just, you're still gonna, doesn't matter the chaos, you still have to do your LTP.
This is our resource, doing STP. Yeah, right.
That's exactly what we did last time, and they still made us change it again.
Yeah. So,
So really the kind of, I guess and I guess this is a direction for John to take to the mayoral forum discussion, is the support or openness to participating in an Otago-wide discussion, at least to start with through the mayoral forum, about what a head start process might look like for Otago. And I guess the mayoral forum might discuss it and say, actually, we'll just wait. So I guess so that part of it is getting a view from the council to inform that discussion about openness to being part of an Otago-wide Head Start process rather than waiting for the next process, which is still an Otago-wide process. Is that the key thing that you kind of need some direction on, John, for that meeting?
We've had a big stick. We've had a, you got to jump,
Yeah.
sort of message last week. And then the question is, well, do we do that? Do we wait? This. I think if there was a really easy, obvious answer, we'd have all landed on that.
Yeah.
And the fact that there isn't an easy, obvious answer that provides difficulty, which actually then make you go, well, actually just go one unitary, and you end up with highly representative, well-paid local boards and things, and it's 5 councils in all but 9. Don't know.
I think.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I've been trying to go to an LTP meeting with a local board representing in Dunedin is not something that I relish. I'm sorry. It's
No.
it's not a cool place to be.
Divergence of views.
Nikki, you got a question?
Well, this is a non-legislative direction, but we'll be making a decision. How are we meeting our consultation requirements under the LGA? Is this considered significant? I'm imagining it is considered significant. Therefore, we have to consult. How are we working through all of that stuff?
So this timeframe and process they're putting forward doesn't really allow for consultation as we would normally see it. I think the way it's structured is that this is an outline proposal that goes in August, and if Cabinet accepts it, then there's a formal proposal that has to go in by, I think it's March the following year. So I think the expectation is that consultation would happen in that formal period. This is essentially an expression of interest.
Okay.
However, that said,
Okay. I'm gonna step in and say, I'm not sure that meets the test. I mean, at the moment, this is the government, and I think being quite political, the way they're going about it, hence the speed, and that's obviously everybody realises that. But just because the government says doesn't mean we get out of our requirements to consult. So I think it's too late at that point. Once we've put in a proposal and the government takes it forward, it's going to be non-meaningful community consultation. So, in terms of our pros and cons, the ability to have a proper conversation with our communities, all of them, region-wide, and go through that proper process so that our decision isn't challenged, because frankly, it could be. I'm assuming we have to sit around a table and agree this. We're not just going to have the mayors, or do we not? Are you suggesting that we don't need to sit around the table and agree something?
So I don't think that the outline proposal being accepted by Cabinet commits us to doing anything. It says that the government is happy for us to provide them with a detailed proposal about what we want to do. And so we could, after that outline proposal is submitted, I assume, based on what we've seen so far, that we could decide not to progress it any further after that if our community consultation said that that wasn't the right thing to do. But I would have thought that you as a council would have to agree to whatever the outline proposal is. So,
And so in that we could put subject to consultation, which would occur if this, and we can put the details in there so that we don't end up in a position where, you know, we get reputational damage conversations.
That anyway.
Can I suggest that we just let Penny run through her thought process here, because
Yeah.
we're probably in agreement. So
Okay.
just walk through what we think we can achieve in this timeframe.
Yeah.
The government's line is, in their documentation, that they are saying they are expecting local councils to demonstrate leadership and connection with their community.
Yeah.
So they are not expecting us to go out for consultation. However, we anticipated that that was not going to be a popular suggestion to bring into this room. So Penny's just going to talk through the conversations that we've been having so far around how we can keep in touch with our community on this.
So our suggestion would be that if we want to go into if you want to go into the Head Start process, that what we could do is do some engagement with the community now to get input into that process. So whilst the timeframes to be able to consult or get feedback on the proposal itself will probably be very tight, we think there's scope to actually get information, engage with the community upfront. And so we had, you know, put this slide together and thought that's a good thing that we would discuss with you today. But it looks like through the Otago process, they also want to do the same thing for all of Otago. So if the agreement is to go into an Otago-wide process, then they would look to doing a similar thing across all of Otago with a standard set of questions, gathering standard information from communities across Otago, which would both be about their local, their views on what would happen if their local council amalgamated, and different options for that, getting ideas on that, I think, or input into that, and also the regional council functions. So there's kind of two parts to this, is if you go down the Head Start path, doing both of these, and you're interested in doing that.
I would just add that they're actually, the way that we're proposing this is that they were look a little bit different.
Yes.
So obviously the unified community consultation, which I believe, John, you've already been, that was a conversation that the mayor's had.
So all the TAs would do something similar.
No, they're all collectively coming up with one suite of questions.
Sure. Yeah.
The
So
point being is we're tight on resources, we're tight on time. What's the point of 5 different councils all doing their own survey? When if we could actually come up with a question set, what are the outcomes that our community are most keen on? Is it saving money? They'll do anything to save money. Is it if we want to have our local representative here? Actually, we want to protect our districts, whatever, a question set that help us understand the broader picture, because we have to see our own echo chamber in our own community. And then actually, what does a unitary council do? What does the regional council do? Because most people, who are interested in this stuff wouldn't know. And so what does a unitary council look like? Because I think that context, and so if we provide some context, ask people on what their outcomes are that they want out of all this, which will be very different for the government.
So we'll signpost all of that through our usual forums so people can find it quite easily. So that's being worked on by staff now. But the second opportunity, which we had considered before we knew that was happening, was we can just basically start a conversation online on our website. Which is more informal. It's not asking specific questions. It's a tool that we have where you can actually go in and join a discussion. You can go in and make comments. So it just starts a conversation. So we can just get that up and running more or less straight away and start conversation. It can have some information. It can point to this. If you want to actually participate in the regional survey, this is how you go do it. If you just want to let our councillors know your thoughts about this. So it's much more informal, but at least it is a way on a tried and trusted forum that our community can feel like they can actually have somewhere to go and have a say. But those are the two options.
I'd rather we have that chat with the mayoral forum, because I think in the very brief time that the mayor's had on a call earlier this week, we felt it was important that the Otago and the politicians lead that discussion because it is a.
So it's like the questions are coming back to your mayoral forum. That's what the works for.
But also, if we then do our own thing on our own website, we put our own time into doing that, then we're going to be asking our community twice, so which is confusing potentially, and also it's sort of if we're trying to do something that is across the district, then does it help if then Queenstown's doing something, therefore we should do something, because it's do we work together or do we work separately?
I think ultimately that's for you as a council to decide whether you want to do just the Otago consultation or whether you want to have something with a local flavour as well. The two we were designed to be very complementary, and it's not a huge amount of work actually to have that online forum active. So it really just depends the level of conversation you want to encourage participation with from the community. So, but yeah, really, actually, digital pathways are probably our only viable option in the final.
I guess one of the considerations is still the wanting to be part of the Otago. If you know, if you're deciding you're in on the Otago option, then that might look different to actually we want to do some of our own thinking separate to that alongside it. That's kind of one of the choices, well not kind of, that is one of the choices that's available to you here. And from our perspective, being part of the collaborative process from the beginning is the best pathway, because as you know, John said in relation to this, we're not duplicating resources, you're pooling resources to think about, on the analysis side, to think about what the options are and the evidence that supports it, rather than each council doing its own work about what unitary options could be available. You're bringing all those people together to get joint thinking that can then be taken away by each of the individual councils to say, well, what do we think about that? So, I mean, our advice would be that being part of that Otago process.
I think that helps create a foundation
Yeah.
for further work, and that then in terms of workload and capacity helps move us forward. What I would say, just in case you've got any questions over this, the mayoral forum is, the secretariat is provided by the ORC. So the ORC have some resources that are helping to coordinate this work, even though they don't have skin in the game per se, they can't participate, which is very, very helpful for ensuring, as per Nikki's point, that there's an understanding of regional council insights into this. So whilst they're not formally engaged in this process, in our relationships, they are very much so, and they're helping to keep us moving forward in a positive way.
And I mean, putting people on the spot, but trustees and some officers, you've had some district-wide or region-wide conversations.
No.
What's the staff-led view as to what makes sense? What does good look like?
So there's, it's far too early to say, and as per like with this conversation, there's lots of ideas kicked around. The CEs have met several times to discuss this and to think through the different options that are out there, and there are many different options. But you know, I think it's fair to say that at this point, that is just a collection of officers comparing notes and trying to do some problem solving. I would draw you back to this point around simplification. There's probably 15 to 20 different options that could be considered in this, you know, based upon a number of different things, whether you're looking at economic flows, community of interests, geographical layout, catchment. It's really, really broad, and when you spend a little bit of time in it, you realise there's many options. What I would say is that, you know, there are existing water entities being stood up. And I think it's fair to say that some of our neighbours are looking to the boundaries of the water entities as being a potential good logical step for them.
But equally, the different decisions would have been made on water entities had we been in this position.
Exactly.
I think probably
Sorry. Online. Nikki?
I'm out of sync, so keep going. Mine's on the consultation bit.
Okay, cool. Karen, any?
I'd say from this is going to sound like a real policy wonk thing to say, but from an officer perspective, what's really important is that there is a thoughtful, evidence-based process to look at the options. That it isn't a bunch of people with a map on the wall going, what if we put the line there and there and got some post-it notes out and went, this should sit with these people and this should sit with these people. I mean, ELT kind of had a crack at doing that, and what we found was that that was really difficult without good information supporting what the functions actually were, how they work together, like what these functions look like at other councils. So that which is why that kind of process to come together and build that evidence base to come up with some options with good advice about why they are good and not good.
The numbers really matter too, because this isn't going to change the fact that we are representative democracy, and that the number of councillors or representatives you get will be based on the the population, your share of the population. Now, as I said the other day, that if you just take the Central Otago QLDC model, then what that does in effect, purely on population, is representation out of the Maniatoto and out of the Teviot Valley almost completely, because they just don't come anywhere near the numbers that justify their own representation. And that's interesting place to be. Cody?
There's an alternate path to that though, because you don't have to be represented based on wards. You could have a Central Otago district where it doesn't matter where you're from. You either go for Central Otago, and then that's what you go for, and then the community boards are based on location. So it doesn't have to be in the same way that we're doing it. I do think there.
But it has to be representative. Now there's the communities of interest bits, which is the bit that, but it doesn't, you could justify having one community board for a population, or for Queenstown, and then one for Roxburgh, because there's a, fundamental difference in the representation level then.
So you could have councillors elected at large.
And then the councillors are, but the community, that was the difference.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But it doesn't completely override. It allows you to weight the representation, but it doesn't allow you to override the fact that it's got to be proportional.
One thing I would say in response to your question, the ELT did an exercise around what would be an optimum thing, and this is before Head Start came out, and basically we landed on a unitary, either for this district or a unitary for Inland Otago, which isn't wildly controversial, but it was before we were told we would have to be a unitary. So it kind of makes some sense.
We've got a representation review due next year.
Yeah.
I presume that doesn't happen.
Obsolete.
We'll have money in a plan for it somewhere.
It's not a very expensive exercise, is it?
No, it's not.
It's not a huge saving,
It's an
unfortunately.
internal process mostly. So
Yeah.
Do it ourselves.
Okay, just
So I just,
presume that won't be happening then.
Well, again, we'd need to get some dispensation to not do it. I think it's mandated.
but what Quentin just said, I don't think actually applies, because in particular, Central Otago is probably a good example of it. They have community boards now that are not at all representative of population size. They're probably more representative of how many sheep there are in each of them. So it's not something that the local government commission is required to look at. Only there's other things.
Partly the size of the Teviot board is relative. It's relatively smaller than the Cromwell board because of its population. The size of the Toto board is smaller than the.
Yes, but not to the extent that I don't think the extent. Yes,
No.
I don't think it's a biggie, but because Alexander is part of it with most of the population is anyway. I think it's something we need to think about. How will that fit? But the consultation stuff, I think this is important to try and get some consultation done now, because in 1989, after the process had been applied, there was virtually no consultation. But the consultation that went on beforehand was very influential in the decisions that were later made, even on the margins, like should Cromwell have been in central the Queenstown Lakes or Central Otago, and should Wanaka have been? And the consultation that went on beforehand showed where the community of interest lay. I think those communities are now very different from where they were, and the economies are different from where they were in '89. So if we can sort of get that sort of analysis, it will help inform that decision making later. I think it's important because it didn't get a look, despite Nikki despite in 1989, the 1974 Local Government Act requiring consultation, that did not happen. The government then, fourth Labor government, didn't care. This government doesn't care. They will just do it. The more information we have to inform the decision, the better.
And they could change legislation. The legislation they put in that's enabling this
Could just make
will undoubtedly provide a pathway to do this in the most expedient way.
Okay, question online.
Well, just going back to that consultation thing that I don't really care what they might do with legislation or this or that or down the track. I mean, at the moment we have an obligation. The Local Government Act says what it says, so we have to comply with that. So I think Megan's, concept is great. I think we should start the conversation. Communities will be wondering what on earth's happening. We can help inform that. Sorry, I'm telling everyone to suck eggs. You probably, this is what you're planning on doing. But if we could get a web page up that sort of explains and that gets filled in along the way as, the mayoral forum conversation happens and as things start to shift, at the same time gathering thoughts on what's going on. I think that would be really cool to just involve people along the way, because it will change over time. But that's the whole bringing everyone with you, right? And there will be more formal consultation. Well, hopefully there's a more formal consultation piece once. But I think that engagement and that collecting ideas and informing people will be really helpful as early as possible.
So my question to councillors is, which I'll take to the mayoral forum next Friday, is our appetite to try and get something together to meet the Head Start date, or do we think we need more time to do that to get information?
I think we need more time.
Yeah. I think unfortunately that the decision as to whether we engage in a fast track, what is that?
Freudian slip.
Is not actually up to us, because we're not the majority of the region. So the region will determine whether we engage in a stop back, a fast track, whatever it's called. But I think our position should be that, look, we're engaging in a regional deal, come and talk to us and talk about the future of how we're going to work, because this is ridiculous. But, if the region decide to engage in it, we need to have a proposal, if that's what they do.
Isn't it interesting that if the regional deal had actually so far delivered anything meaningful for Central Otago District Council, they have a different view now on this, but it hasn't, so they don't.
Yeah. The way this is framed, I made a joke, but it's actually a mathematical thing. It's the prisoner's dilemma, and there's an advantage to the first mover. So from my perspective, the faster we can move with our own agenda allows us to shape the agenda, even if it isn't the original one. And frankly, I happen to like the one lower right up there, because it defines two urban regions and a very rural region. But to lead with that, or to lead with something, gives us an advantage. And there's gamesmanship here, and I believe in the gamesmanship, and I believe that the government literally designed it this way.
I have a
Yeah,
point.
like what's the pros and not? I can't think of it.
With the risk of not going forward, it will depend on what the rest of Otago want to do.
Yeah.
If everybody else in Otago is going, we're going for a head start, then there is a lot of cons with us not being part of that process. Whatever they come up with can just be done to us. So I think
we've got to be part of the conversations.
So having the mayoral forum come to a consensus about whether that should happen or not is probably what will lead that.
Maybe our superpower is the fact that nobody actually wants to join with us. So I don't know. Cody?
Well, yeah, to share a different perspective, I think a lot of this comes from a place that the community are confused at who they're going to for their council. And we get this a lot in Upper Clutha, where they go, why does it say Queenstown on the council here? And they said, well, Queenstown Lakes includes Queenstown and Wanaka. And I go, well, that's confusing. And so, God, if we stay as a unitary authority, we need to change the name. The other aspect I keep considering is that Cromwell is both closer to Queenstown and Wanaka than Queenstown and Wanaka is. And yet they're not in our district. And, you know, you can sort of curve Cromwell in and call it Otago Lakes because we're the only ones that actually have lakes that are significant enough. But I do think it's worthwhile keeping in mind, you know, I appreciate the policy view and the strategy point of view, but this all came about from a customer point of view of, you know, as a customer, what makes sense. And, you know, like growing up here, we always, you know, played for Wanaka. Then when you graduated, it became Central Otago and that was the sub-region. And then when you graduated from that, it became Otago. So I disagree that there's not an obvious play. I think the whole regional deal was set up to steer us in this direction. And so I think the Central Otago thing's obvious. I just prefer to keep it as small as possible. But yeah, that's my points.
I think a lot of it's going to come out of your mayor forum, John, and just see where it's sitting with the other mayors.
But also out of
Take it from there, I
consultation,
guess.
I wouldn't have thought that Cromwell was so, that CODC was so anti-QLDC.
They're happily joined with the upper Cliff.
Yeah, but they can't, but like, well, I mean,
That's not a bad spot for the work.
Yeah, but it might, it's
They
not.
don't want the growth.
No, but
yeah, but like that,
not a
to
bad
consultation, it's interesting to listen to the people, right, and go, oh, well,
we'd be 44%. If we were just met with Central Otago and the Upper Cliff, it would be something like 44%.
You mean Wanaka, the Upper Cliff, yeah?
Would be 40% of the Central Otago district,
that's right.
which is like, that's a power center.
But you're 40% of the Queenstown Lakes district now.
Sorry?
Yeah.
You're 40% of the Queenstown Lakes district now, so it will be the same situation.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I think, John, you just need to have, you know, when the opportunity comes up,
No, that's something,
that's
that's
what we need
because
to suggest.
yeah.
No one wants to play with that.
19,000 versus 25 versus 19,000
It'll
versus
come up.
35
Imagine.
or something. Anyway,
So
Close enough.
yeah.
it's a bit like the conversation we were having the other day about the relationship with Climate Offender to some extent, and the announcement made by the Ministry of Health last week. So the assumption in the health of the clinical services plan is that there will be a new hospital for Central Lakes that will not be in Queenstown, that will probably be in Cromwell. That's so one of the problems I think others have with QLDC is thinking that if there is a new entity, that the head office for that, everything will emanate from Queenstown, like we're all concerned about the regional model, it would be decisions would be made in Dunedin. When in reality, a Central Otago, Queenstown Lakes, whatever a new entity is, and I'd just be happy to get Cromwell and the rest of the Upper Cliff, but into a new entity. But it doesn't mean that it needs to be based here. It would probably be strategically more useful if it wasn't in Queenstown, if it was perhaps in Cromwell. And similarly, if there is a regional entity, it would be better if it wasn't in Dunedin or here, probably somewhere else, because then there's more, it's more acceptable to everyone. There's more compromise, you know, so that sort of stuff I think comes into it, John. It's not just saying that we want it our way and it's here in Dunedin, which they're literally saying we want it our way. So we can take a different approach and say, well, we want a solution that, or set of solutions that meets.
And I think that's exactly what you put into the design sectors, because we are completely networked. You know, Cromwell has a wonderful new arts centre, for example. You know, what role does that play for Queenstown and Wanaka? You know, when you're talking new council buildings, where does that play a role? So there's all sorts of different stimulus in there. I think what I would just urge though, is I think, you know, I think there is a time in this process to be highly collaborative, and there is a time at some point where your communities will require you to think from a Queenstown and a Wanaka perspective. So just steel yourselves for that, because there might be some tougher conversations with the government.
Okay, so I think.
And I guess you will get a feel, you know, at the forum around what the other mayors are thinking, because they might all say, none of us are going to be doing a head start, so none of us want to go down this line.
I'm not sure.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's any councils keen to join the Dunedin City Council.
Yeah.
And like Central, you know, Cluth and Gore are all on the same water services, DCO. So, yeah,
That's a natural progression.
that's their, yeah, and they are all predominantly rural, right? Yeah, I know Central, Cromwell's got a bit, but
Just going to Q's point, that might actually give us leverage to say we want to be by ourselves. We say, we'll support your proposal. By tying in with, agreeing with them, we end up being the majority of the region, and we tell Dunedin what to do, Dunedin stay by themselves, they become their own entity, we stay the same, and everyone's happy.
I don't,
See,
That's scenario.
what supports that is the growth numbers.
Yeah.
The growth numbers, and unfortunately, we can't get the appendix up. It shows us growing at 2.7 a year. We aren't. That was just in 2024. We aren't even growing at 3%, which is what Infometrics says. And at 3% a year, we would double in every 25 years. We're growing at 4.4% a year over the last 30 years, which means our population doubles every 16 years, which makes us totally different than everybody else. There's a slide right there. The other 4 regions aren't even keeping up with the birth rate without migration. And we're 4.4%. So we are completely unique. Forget about the international airport. Forget about everything else. We are totally unique, and we will be bigger than that amalgamated council in 16 years and almost the size of Dunedin. So I think that we have a very good case to make, which is why we are so distinct. So we can't fight the numbers.
It runs,
But that's
back into the original deal.
The real reason that CODC don't want to go with us is the debt to revenue ratio.
Yeah.
Ours is nearly 10 times theirs.
That's water.
But I think that's the size of the other council.
and just so you know, the water entities, when they've merged, they've done harmonisation activities to smooth some of those differences, so different regions aren't being penalised by other parts' debt levels. So, you know, there would be those conversations to be having. In terms of the actual financial management going forward, there's quite a lot of water to go under that bridge.
And then, look at the assets, we own 3/4 of an airport, it's worth about 3/4 billion. So, it's not just the debt, and, you have to look at the assets as well. So,
All I'm saying is I think that's what they look at. And they say
it will be,
because it's well publicised what our debt levels are.
Well, I'm not,
that Queenstown boss.
I'm not, I think it's more probably that. Because actually that was as we've talked around here, a big proportion of our debt is water. And so our debt to revenue ratio is majority water, which will be going out of council. But also when we were talking about all the options for our water entity, it wasn't something that was off-putting to them when we were talking about amalgamating from a water perspective, even though we had a really high debt to revenue ratio because of the, you can harmonise that. You don't have to carry that debt everywhere. So I think there's lots of reasons why lots of people are going into the media saying they don't want to go to Queenstown.
Just a question though, so if in terms of what Q's talking about in terms of, which I think was scenario 4 on the screen previously.
Yep.
Well, we would need at least one other one other council with enough people to be able to submit that proposal. We can't submit that proposal on our own. So you need somebody else on board. So
if you need the Dunedin to suggest that, or the other
support it, because 2
or the
or
other 3,
3%.
the 3 smaller councils with ourselves.
So if scenario 4 was what we actually wanted to do down the track, you would need to convince the others to submit that proposal.
The thing is, this is what the really, the terribleness of it is that under the rules, we could theoretically force it on them. We in Dunedin could force it on the other 3.
Yeah, I get that, but we definitely need another big council to be able to do it.
The other 3 could force this on us in Dunedin.
Yeah.
In fact, the other 3, I think, because it's if you're more than 50% of the population or a majority of the councils. So 3 is 3 a majority?
But
3 is a majority. They could put forward us in Queenstown, us in Dunedin.
Feel for it.
keep going back to Southland, because Southland could actually.
Come up with their own.
You go back to Southland, because if you actually talk to Southland and said, hey, Southland, how about we put a deal that's Southland and QLDC? There's 2 councils putting that proposal to in accordance with the rules.
In a different region.
You have to
So you're not 50% of the region then.
But Southland are already looking to do Southland Core.
Yeah.
I'm just spitballing that if we wanted to try and just keep the QLDC, we have to find somebody else to agree to.
But there's a soft
to
wall
help that
around the
proposal.
region. So,
The plane's all over against each other.
Returning
Hunger Games.
with the The challenge I've had with the two urbans staying individually, the conversation I was having this week was that they're not interested in people staying as a standalone district.
Yeah.
They do want to see some scale, they do want to see some change.
Yeah.
So that I can see that one there follows communities of interest.
Unless you actually get them to recognise that we're a special case.
Well, that we're a large
Which has been our case all the way along, you know, the special economic zone and the whatever it is. We are, you know, everything we say, we don't fit in the box, so why not treat us differently?
Yeah.
It's simpler.
Don't-
Simpler.
Yeah, I think the message is landing really well that, you know.
Well, I guess the argument though there is that if you say that we are a large metro, we're metro heading to a large metro in terms of what Q's saying, then the argument say, well, if Dunedin's going to have a standalone one, then when we're on a par, then why can't we have a standalone one? And the middle ones is where you get the amalgamation.
Economies of scale.
I think Dunedin would get some pushback as well, though, if Dunedin proposed to come back.
Yeah.
It's not just related to us. I think they'd still have some trouble with that.
From government.
Right.
Government, yeah.
Right.
My personal opinion, and you said it doesn't look like there's an obvious solution, but for the government there is, and it's all of Otago. A slightly more palatable one, you know, without having the Central Otago QLDC, Anti would be the inland coastal. But I think the other one where all it's doing is amalgamating the three rural ones isn't really simplifying. The government will just say it's not really achieving anything we want to say.
True. So is there then an option? So who plays poker here? So we'll see your suggestion that we go with some unitaries. We'll raise that, have all of Otago. And then they have to sit down and go, well, hang on, well, how are we going to make that work? So, you know, because it's way beyond the economies of scale. It won't deliver the goods. It will make it more complex. It will make it more expensive for everyone. So we could raise a hand and say, yeah, let's go with that. And then see what comes from it. Because that's what they, you know.
Probably what they really want is all of Otago and South.
It's what
Some have thought, that'd be even worse, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I still think we should go with the Chatham Islands because we've got that interest in Cape Cod and crayfish.
No one else was going to
Not in our region.
No.
Okay, well, yeah.
Cheers, mate.
See how the conversation goes.
Yeah.
Poker
So that next Friday.
Yeah, we are going up there onto.
No, be nice. Well, they can all come and listen to the discussion you've just had before then, so.
That's a good time.
On the day after the 23rd.
Yeah, all the workshops are recorded and published.
It's not about forcing, it's about collaboration.
Yeah. We love our neighbours. We don't want to nice them.
We had it was it 2nd of June or was it later?
I think it was the 2nd of June.
That could work. I'm just thinking in follow up to the mayoral forum, further conversation.
Okay.
Well.
All right, thanks everyone. Yeah, interesting time.
Never a dull moment here.
No.
How many more sleeps in the budget? 2 weeks.
I don't think that can be split to be elections.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks, online people. See you all tomorrow for deliberations.
Yeah.
10 o'clock.